The crystal palace of Cylindris gleamed like a jewel against the star-drunk sky, its translucent spires catching light from 3 different suns and refracting it into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Captain Elena Vasquez kept her eyes fixed on the approaching shuttle dock, trying not to think about the fact that she was about to become the 15th human bodyguard assigned to Queen Zarathul in the past 2 years. The previous 14 hadn't exactly set encouraging precedents. Your assignment duration will depend entirely on your performance, her commanding officer had explained with the enthusiasm of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. The Queen has particular standards regarding personal security. Elena had done her research. 3 guards dismissed for incompetence, 2 for sleeping on duty, 4 for attempted theft, 3 who'd simply vanished under circumstances the official records described as contractual disagreements, and 2 who'd been exiled for what the diplomatic files euphemistically termed inappropriate conduct with valuable cultural artifacts. The shuttle settled into its berth with a soft hiss of atmospheric equalization, and Elena gathered her gear with the methodical precision of someone who'd learned that preparation was the difference between success and becoming a cautionary tale. Her service record was spotless: 12 years in Terran Defense Forces, specialist training in VIP protection, commendations for service under fire, and not so much as a late report in her entire military career. She was also, according to the psychological profiles the Andorians had requested, exceptionally resistant to material temptation and driven by intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation factors. In layman's terms, she couldn't be bought. The palace's interior made the exterior look modest. Every surface seemed designed to remind visitors that they were in the presence of wealth beyond human comprehension. The walls were inlaid with crystallized starlight that pulsed with its own internal rhythm, floors were carved from single pieces of Alterian marble that changed color based on ambient temperature, and the ceiling displayed a real-time view of surrounding space that made Elena feel like she was walking through the cosmos itself. Captain Vasquez announced a figure emerging from what appeared to be a pillar of living light. "I am Chamberlain Kethvar. Her Majesty is expecting you." Elena followed the Chamberlain through corridors that showcased artifacts from across the known galaxy, weapons that could level cities, art pieces that predated human civilization, and technological devices whose purposes she couldn't even guess. Everything was displayed with casual elegance that suggested the Queen owned so much priceless material that security was almost an afterthought. Almost. Elena's trained eye caught the subtle defensive measures: energy barriers disguised as decorative elements, automated defense systems built into the architectural details, and scan fields so sophisticated they probably knew her medical history before she'd finished walking through them. This wasn't carelessness. It was confidence backed by technology that made human military systems look like stone knives. Queen Zarathul's throne room redefined the concept of overwhelming grandeur. The monarch herself sat on a chair carved from a single enormous diamond, wearing robes that seemed to be woven from light itself. She was exactly as beautiful as the intelligence briefings had suggested, with one crucial detail they'd somehow failed to capture: her presence filled the vast chamber like a physical force. "Captain Vasquez," the Queen said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. "Welcome to Cylindris. I trust your journey was comfortable." "Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you for the assignment." Queen Zarathul studied her with eyes that held intelligence sharp enough to cut glass. Her ears, gracefully pointed and slightly longer than human ones, were the only visible sign of her alien heritage. Everything else about her could have been human perfection refined to an impossible degree. "Your assignment," the Queen continued, "is simpler than my previous guard seemed to understand. You will protect my person, maintain security in my private quarters, and ensure that my daily routine proceeds without incident. Do you foresee any difficulties with these requirements?" "No, Your Majesty." "Excellent. Chamberlain Kethvar will show you to your quarters and explain the specific protocols. I expect you to begin duties tomorrow morning." Elena bowed and followed the Chamberlain from the throne room, but not before catching the Queen's parting observation: "I do hope you'll prove more durable than your predecessors." Her assigned quarters were more luxurious than any accommodation Elena had ever inhabited, featuring a bed that adjusted to optimal comfort settings, walls that could display any vista in the Galactic databases, and amenities that anticipated needs she hadn't known she had. The attached briefing room contained detailed files on palace security, threat assessments, and protocols for protecting the Queen during various activities. It also contained a disturbing pattern in the records of previous guards. Guard 7 dismissed after priceless Andromedan sculpture found in personal effects. Guard 9 exiled following discovery of ancient technological schematics in quarters. Guard 12 terminated when caught attempting to remove ceremonial dagger from Queen's private collection. Elena stared at the files, trying to understand how professional security personnel could be so uniformly unprofessional. Either the Queen had extraordinarily bad luck with hiring, or something about this assignment systematically corrupted previously reliable individuals. Her first day on duty provided enlightening context. Queen Zarathol's private chambers were a monument to casual extravagance. Artifacts worth more than entire planetary budgets were scattered across tables like someone's collection of interesting paperweights. Ancient texts containing technological secrets were left open to crucial pages, as if someone had been reading them over breakfast and forgotten to put them away. Jewelry that could fund small wars was draped over furniture with the carelessness of someone who owned so many precious things that keeping track had become impossible. "Your Majesty," Elena said carefully during their first private security briefing, "perhaps some of these valuable items should be stored in more secure locations." The Queen's smile held depths Elena couldn't fathom. "Security, Captain. But these are my personal quarters. Surely the safest place for my possessions is where I can see them." "Of course, Your Majesty. I was simply noting that some of these artifacts appear quite accessible." "Indeed they are. I prefer my treasures to be enjoyed rather than locked away. Don't you find beauty more meaningful when it can be touched, experienced, appreciated intimately?" Elena felt like she was navigating a minefield where every word might trigger an explosion she couldn't see coming. "Beauty certainly has its place, Your Majesty." "Yes," Queen Zarathol agreed, her penetrating gaze studying Elena's face with scientific interest. "The question is whether those entrusted with guarding beauty can resist the temptation to possess it." The conversation ended there, but Elena spent the rest of the day wondering if she'd just been warned, tested, or both. By her second week, Elena had concluded that either Queen Zarathol was the most careless person in the galaxy, or she was witnessing the most elaborate psychological experiment ever conducted on unsuspecting bodyguards. The evidence was mounting daily, and none of it pointed toward simple negligence. Monday, a crystallized fragment of the Cygnus Nebula, worth approximately 50 million credits, accidentally rolled off the Queen's desk while Elena was reviewing security reports. It came to rest directly beside Elena's foot, glowing with internal light that painted rainbow patterns across the floor. Tuesday, an ancient precursor data cube containing technological specifications that could revolutionize human engineering was left balanced precariously on the edge of a table, as if someone had been examining it and simply walked away mid-thought. Wednesday, a ceremonial blade forged from collapsed star matter, both priceless and powerful enough to cut through any known defense, was found lying on the Queen's nightstand with a note reading, "For cleaning, handle with care." "Your Majesty," Elena said during their evening security briefing, "I'm noticing some patterns that concern me from a protection standpoint." Queen Zarathol looked up from the Andromedan poetry collection she'd been reading, another artifact worth more than most planets' annual budgets, currently serving as her light reading material. "Patterns, Captain. Valuable items appearing in vulnerable positions. It creates unnecessary security risks." "Does it? I hadn't noticed." The Queen's expression remained perfectly innocent, but Elena caught the subtle way her alien ears twitched with what might have been suppressed amusement. "Perhaps you could provide some examples." Elena pulled up her daily reports on her tactical display. The nebula fragment yesterday. The data cube Tuesday. The star matter blade this morning. Each incident creates potential complications for maintaining secure environmental protocols. "Ah. The queen set down her poetry collection with careful precision. And what sort of complications do you foresee? Elena hesitated, sensing dangerous currents beneath the seemingly straightforward conversation. Temptation, Your Majesty. Previous guards may have been influenced by proximity to such valuable materials. Influenced how? The personnel files suggest that many of my predecessors left under circumstances involving improper acquisition of palace property. Queen Zarathol's smile held more complexity than Elena was comfortable processing. And do you feel influenced, Captain Vasquez? I feel concerned about security protocols that allow priceless artifacts to be treated as casual decor. That wasn't what I asked. The silence stretched between them while Elena carefully considered her response. The Queen's penetrating gaze made her feel like a specimen under examination, and she was beginning to understand that every word in this conversation carried weight she couldn't fully measure. Your Majesty, I took an oath to protect you and your interests. That protection extends to ensuring that your possessions remain secure and your trust isn't misplaced. My trust. The Queen repeated the phrase as if tasting it. Tell me, Captain, what do you believe my most valuable possessions are? Elena glanced around the chamber, cataloging artifacts that represented the wealth of worlds. The technological archives. The artistic collections. The ceremonial regalia. The crystallized stellar matter. All replaceable. Your Majesty. Everything you've listed can be replaced, given sufficient resources and time. What do you think I possess that truly cannot be replaced? Elena considered the question, aware that she was being led somewhere but uncertain of the destination. Your knowledge. Your political relationships. Your. She paused, struck by sudden understanding. Your safety. Closer. The Queen rose from her chair and moved to the chamber's great window, which looked out over the star-drunk expanse of space. My previous guards failed to understand what they were truly protecting. They saw treasures, artifacts, valuable objects. They protected things. What should they have been protecting? Queen Zarathol turned, and for a moment her regal composure slipped enough to reveal something Elena hadn't expected: loneliness. Deep, aching isolation that no amount of wealth or power could address. Me, Captain. Not my throne, not my treasury, not my political position. Me. The person behind all these trappings. She gestured to the wealth surrounding them. But how does one test whether a protector sees the person or only the possessions? Elena felt pieces of a complex puzzle clicking into place. The careless placement of valuables. The apparently accidental opportunities for theft. The personnel files showing guards dismissed for property crimes. Very good. Yes, I create scenarios that reveal character. Those who see only valuable objects eventually succumb to temptation. Those who see a person worth protecting. She paused. Well, I'm still searching for those individuals. And if I had taken something? The nebula fragment, the data cube? Then you would have joined the ranks of former employees who confused guardianship with opportunity. Elena studied the Queen's face, seeing past the regal beauty to something more human than she'd expected. Your Majesty, with respect, these tests seem designed to create the very problems you're trying to prevent. Explain. By surrounding your guards with unsecured valuables, you're essentially daring them to prove their unworthiness. You're creating an environment of mistrust that breeds the behavior you claim to want to avoid. Queen Zarathol's eyes narrowed, but Elena detected interest rather than anger. And what would you suggest instead? Trust first, test through genuine challenges rather than manufactured temptations. Give your guards reasons to want to protect you beyond duty or fear of punishment. Reasons such as... Elena realized she was about to venture into territory her military training hadn't covered. Respect. Genuine care for your welfare. The knowledge that you value them as people rather than just functionaries who might steal from you. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena with an intensity that made her feel like every thought was being weighed and measured. Finally, she spoke. "Captain Vasquez, I believe you may be the first guard who's passed a test you didn't know you were taking." "Which test was that, Your Majesty?" "The one where I discover whether my protector cares more about guarding my possessions or protecting my heart." Elena felt her breath catch as she realized the conversation had shifted into territory far more dangerous than any physical threat she'd been trained to handle. 3 weeks into her assignment, Elena's relationship with Queen Zarathul had evolved into something she hadn't expected, genuine friendship built on mutual respect and increasingly personal late-night conversations that stretched far beyond security briefings. The Queen's elaborate tests had given way to honest discussions about leadership, loneliness, and the burden of never knowing whether people approached her for herself or her position. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you'd been born ordinary?" Elena asked one evening as they reviewed security reports that had somehow transformed into a philosophical discussion about power and isolation. "Every day," the Queen replied, her alien ears drooping slightly in a gesture Elena had learned indicated sadness. "But then I remember that ordinary people don't usually have 15 bodyguards quit in 2 years because they couldn't resist stealing from their employer." 14, Elena corrected. "I'm still here." "Yes, you are." Zarathul's smile held warmth that transformed her from distant monarch to someone Elena was beginning to care about far more than duty required. "Though I confess I'm running out of tests to determine your true character." "Maybe that's because you already know my true character, and you're just afraid to trust what you've learned." The Queen's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps you're right. Trust has never been my strength." Their conversation was interrupted by alarms that filled the Crystal Palace with warning harmonics. Elena's training kicked in immediately as she accessed threat assessment displays that painted the situation in urgent reds and yellows. "Carillion Syndicate infiltration team," she reported, already moving toward the emergency weapons cache. 12 operatives, armed with plasma cutters and neural disruptors. They've breached the outer defenses and are heading for the treasury vaults. "The treasury?" Queen Zarathul rose from her chair with fluid grace. "How predictable. They think the real prize is in the vaults. Isn't it? The real prize, Captain, is standing right here in this room." Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized the implications. "They're not after your treasure. They're after you." Finally, someone who understands the difference. The next 20 minutes tested every aspect of Elena's training as she coordinated palace defenses while keeping the Queen safe from infiltrators who moved through the crystal spires with professional precision. The Carillions were good, better than good, and their equipment suggested backing from someone with serious resources. "Your Majesty, we need to get you to the secure bunker," Elena said as energy blasts lit up the corridor outside the throne room. "Absolutely not. I don't cower in bunkers while my people fight to protect me. Your people will fight better knowing you're safe. My people will fight better seeing that their queen stands with them." Elena found herself torn between professional duty and growing personal concern. The Queen's courage was admirable, but courage without wisdom was just another word for stupidity, and Elena cared too much about Zarathul's welfare to let admiration override judgment. "Then we stay together," she decided. "But you follow my lead on tactical decisions." "Agreed." The running battle through the palace's corridors revealed both Elena's skill and the depth of her commitment to protecting not just the Queen's life, but her dignity and authority. When Carillion operatives used priceless artifacts as shields, Elena didn't hesitate to destroy them with return fire rather than risk the Queen's safety. When ancient technological devices could have provided tactical advantages, she ignored them in favor of maintaining protective positioning around Zarathul. The Precursor Data Archive. The Queen called out as energy blasts shattered a display case containing technological specifications worth entire star systems. "It's irreplaceable." "So are you," Elena replied, dragging her behind cover as plasma bolts turned million-year-old artifacts into expensive debris. The turning point came when the infiltration team's leader cornered them in the Queen's private chambers, surrounded by all the scattered treasures that had once served as character tests for Elena and her predecessors. "Your Majesty," the Carillion commander announced, his weapon trained on Zarathol while his team secured the room. "You're coming with us. Alive, preferably, but that's negotiable." Elena stepped between them, her own weapon ready but knowing she was outnumbered 6-1. "Counter-offer, you leave now and I don't kill all of you for threatening my queen." "Your queen?" The commander laughed. "How touchingly loyal. Tell me, human, what's she paying you to die for her?" "Because I guarantee our employers will pay more for you to step aside." "She's not paying me anything to die for her." "Then why?" "Because some things matter more than money. Some people are worth protecting regardless of reward. And some oaths mean something even when no one's watching to make sure you keep them." Elena could feel the queen's eyes on her as she spoke, but she kept her attention focused on the weapons pointed at both of them. The Carillion leader studied her with the expression of someone trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. "You're willing to die to protect her." "I'm willing to kill to protect her. The dying part is optional." What followed was the kind of close-quarters combat that turned palatial chambers into war zones. Elena moved with precision born from training and desperation fueled by genuine care for the woman she'd sworn to protect. When the fighting ended, she found herself bleeding from multiple wounds while checking on the queen's condition with hands that shook more from fear than injury. "Elena," Zarathol whispered, using her first name for the first time. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "Are you injured?" "I'm fine." "But you ignored a dozen opportunities to grab priceless artifacts that could have bought your way to any life you wanted." Elena looked around the destroyed chamber, noting the scattered treasures she'd stepped over or destroyed without a second thought during the fight. "Your Majesty, I've been trying to tell you for weeks that I don't want your treasures." "Then what do you want?" Elena met her eyes, seeing not a queen or a ruler or a collection of valuable assets, but a woman who had finally found someone willing to protect what truly mattered. "I want you to be safe. I want you to trust me. I want—" She hesitated, then decided honesty was the only policy that made sense. "I want to matter to someone who matters to me." Queen Zarathol's smile outshone every treasure in the palace. "Captain Elena Vasquez, you have just passed my final test." "What test was that?" "The one where I discover whether my protector would choose my life over all the wealth in my kingdom." Elena looked around the ruined chamber, then back at the queen whose safety meant more to her than all the crystallized starlight in the galaxy. "That wasn't really a test, Your Majesty. That was just me doing my job." "No, Elena. That was you proving that some people are worth trusting with everything that matters." 2 months after the Carillion attack, Elena had grown accustomed to the queen's genuine trust and the absence of elaborate psychological tests. Which was why the assassination attempt that interrupted their morning security briefing caught her completely off guard, not because it happened, but because of how obviously staged it appeared to be. The assassins moved with theatrical precision, their attack patterns designed more for dramatic effect than lethal efficiency. When Elena's return fire struck one attacker, he collapsed with a performance that would have earned applause in any acting academy. Most tellingly, the valuable artifacts scattered around the chamber remained mysteriously undamaged despite the pitched battle raging around them. "Your Majesty, stay down," Elena called, maintaining protective fire while her tactical instincts screamed that nothing about this situation made sense. The final assassin fled dramatically, clutching a bag that appeared to contain some of the queen's most precious treasures, artifacts Elena had learned to recognize from weeks of seeing them casually displayed throughout the royal chambers. The fleeing figure moved just slowly enough that pursuit would be possible, if Elena chose to abandon her protective position. She looked down at Queen Zarathol, who lay motionless on the chamber floor, a spreading pool of what appeared to be blood darkening her robes. The queen's face was pale, her breathing shallow, and her alien ears had gone completely still, a sign Elena had learned indicated either deep sleep or serious medical trauma. Training said pursue the fleeing criminals and recover the stolen assets. Duty said protect the queen's property and maintain the security of her holdings. protocol said gather intelligence on the attack and ensure no additional threats remained. Elena's heart said none of that mattered if the woman she'd come to love was dying. Forget the treasure, she muttered, dropping to her knees beside the Queen and beginning emergency medical assessment. Forget the artifacts. Just stay with me, Zara. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vital signs and applying pressure to what appeared to be a serious wound in the Queen's abdomen. The blood felt warm and sticky, exactly as it should, and the Queen's pulse was rapid and thready, all consistent with genuine trauma. "You're not leaving me," Elena whispered, working to stabilize the injury while calling for medical assistance. "I don't care about your tests anymore. I don't care about proving myself. I just need you to be okay." She was so focused on her medical efforts that she almost missed the moment when Queen Zarathol's breathing suddenly regularized and her supposedly critical wound stopped bleeding. "Elena." The voice was strong, healthy, and completely at odds with someone who should be dying from massive blood loss. Elena looked down to find the Queen's eyes open, alert, and filled with an expression she couldn't immediately identify. "You're..." Elena stared at the wound that was no longer bleeding, at the Queen who was no longer pale, at the medical readings that showed perfectly normal vital signs. This was fake. Yes. All of it. The attack, the injuries, the stolen treasures. Yes. Elena sat back on her heels, trying to process what had just happened. "You staged your own assassination to test whether I would pursue stolen property or stay to help you." "I needed to know," Queen Zarathol said quietly, sitting up and revealing that the blood was some kind of synthetic compound that had perfectly mimicked the real thing. "After everything we've shared, after all the trust that's grown between us, I needed to know what you would choose when faced with the ultimate test." "What I would choose?" Elena's voice carried dangerous calm. "I chose to let billions in irreplaceable artifacts disappear while I tried to save your life. I chose to ignore stolen treasures and fleeing criminals to focus on keeping you alive. I chose you over everything else in this room, including my duty to protect your property." "Yes. And that wasn't good enough. You had to manufacture a crisis to test my priorities." Queen Zarathol's ears drooped with what Elena now recognized as shame. "I had to be certain." "Certain of what?" "That you wouldn't leave me. That when faced with the choice between my life and everything else, you would choose me." The Queen's voice grew smaller, more vulnerable than Elena had ever heard it. "Everyone leaves, Elena. Everyone finds something more valuable than staying with me. I had to know that you wouldn't." Elena stared at her, anger warring with understanding as she processed the depth of loneliness that would drive someone to such elaborate deception. "So you created a scenario where I had to choose between your life and your treasure." "Yes. And when I chose your life without hesitation, without even considering the alternatives, what did that tell you?" "That you..." Zarathol's voice broke slightly. "That you actually care about me. Not my position, not my wealth, not what I can give you. Me." Elena reached out and took the Queen's hands, noting how they trembled despite her regal composure. "Zarathol, you beautiful, insecure, brilliant woman, did you really think I was going to abandon you to chase after stolen trinkets? They weren't trinkets. Those artifacts were worth more than entire star systems. And you're worth more than entire galaxies. Did you really not know that?" The Queen's composure finally cracked, tears flowing down her face as weeks of careful control gave way to raw emotion. "I've never had someone choose me over everything else. I've never been anyone's first priority. I've never..." She struggled with the words. "I've never been loved for who I am rather than what I possess." Elena pulled her close, holding her while she cried out years of loneliness and accumulated disappointment. "Then you've been surrounded by idiots who couldn't recognize the most precious thing in this palace." "What's that?" "Your heart. Your trust. The privilege of being the person you turn to when you're afraid." Elena stroked her hair gently. "The honor of being loved by someone as extraordinary as you. They sat together on the chamber floor, surrounded by fake blood and genuine emotion, while Elena realized that the Queen's elaborate tests had finally revealed something important. Not about Elena's character, but about the depth of insecurity that had driven them. No more tests, Elena said firmly. No more elaborate scenarios or manufactured crises. If you want to know how I feel about you, just ask. How do you feel about me? Elena smiled, seeing past the Queen's regal bearing to the vulnerable woman underneath. I love you, Zarathul. Not your throne, not your treasures, not your political position. You. The person who reads ancient poetry before bed, who worries about being abandoned, who's so afraid of being hurt that she'd rather test people than trust them. Even after I deceived you. Especially after I deceived you. Because now I understand how desperately you needed to know that someone would choose you over everything else in the universe. Queen Zarathul's tears had stopped, replaced by wonder that transformed her face into something even more beautiful than royal perfection. And you did choose me. Without hesitation. Without question. Without a single thought for anything else in this room. Elena gestured to the scattered artifacts around them. You could have staged a dozen more tests and I would have made the same choice every time. I believe you. And I'm sorry I felt I needed to test you at all. I understand why you did. But from now on, trust first, doubt second. Can you do that? I can try. 6 months later, their bonding ceremony became the most celebrated event in the Andorian Empire's recent history. Elena stood beside the woman she loved, wearing ceremonial robes that were beautiful but nowhere near as precious as the trust Zarathul had finally learned to offer freely. Do you, Elena Vasquez, accept the bond of equals with Zarathul, pledging to guard not her possessions but her heart, not her throne but her happiness, not her power but her peace? I do, Elena replied, her voice carrying across the crystal palace to witnesses from across the galaxy. And I pledge to treasure what cannot be stolen, protect what cannot be replaced, and love what cannot be bought. And do you, Queen Zarathul, accept the bond of equals with Elena Vasquez, pledging to trust without testing, love without conditions, and share not just your wealth but your whole self? I do, the Queen replied, her alien ears pointing upward in joy. And I pledge to value the gift of being chosen freely, the treasure of being loved truly, and the security of being protected by someone who sees me as more precious than all the stars in my empire. Their first act as bonded partners was restructuring palace security protocols to eliminate the elaborate testing systems that had tormented previous guards. Instead, they established programs based on mutual trust, clear expectations, and the radical concept that people worked better when treated with respect rather than suspicion. The turnover rate has dropped to zero, Elena reported during their first quarterly review as security partners rather than Queen and Bodyguard. Amazing what happens when you stop surrounding employees with temptation and start trusting them to do their jobs. You were right about my testing creating the problems I was trying to prevent, Zarathul admitted. Fear breeds the betrayal it seeks to avoid. And trust breeds the loyalty it hopes to find. They work together to establish new traditions throughout the empire, leadership based on partnership rather than dominance, security through genuine care rather than elaborate surveillance, and relationships built on mutual respect rather than constant evaluation. Their love story became legendary not just for the romance between species, but for the proof that true security came from protecting hearts rather than hoarding possessions. Elena's choice to stay with the wounded queen rather than pursue stolen treasures became the foundation of new diplomatic principles that spread throughout galactic civilization. Do you ever miss the excitement of the testing? Elena asked one evening as they reviewed reports from across the empire, where similar reforms were transforming other worlds. Never, Zarathul replied, curled against her side in the comfortable intimacy of complete trust. I have something far more valuable than the thrill of elaborate deception. What's that? The certainty that when I wake up tomorrow, and every tomorrow after, the person beside me chose to be here not because I tested her into staying, but because she loves me enough to stay without any tests at all. Elena kissed her forehead, marveling at how someone who owned treasures beyond counting had learned that the most precious thing in her palace was the simple knowledge that she was loved without conditions, protected without reservation, and treasured not for what she possessed, but for who she was. That, Elena agreed, is the most valuable treasure in any galaxy.